Trump, by virtue of his background as a real estate developer in New York, he knows how gangsters operate and think. And he isn't the only Western leader with that type of experience, which makes him, for Putin, a potentially quite challenging negotiating partner.
Hi, I'm Maddie, Hale, and welcome to the Trump Report. Today we've spoken to John Lough, who is a senior fellow who studies a lot of Russia and Ukraine. He's spoken to us about the upcoming meeting between Donald Trump and President Zelenskyy and what Zelenskyy has to ask for and cannot leave Washington without getting for the sake of Ukraine's safety. We've spoken to him about Trump's meeting yesterday with Sir Keir Starmer and if it was cordial, what's going to happen with the US and the UK. So all that today on the Trump Report. You can watch us on YouTube, The Times Radio's YouTube, or stream us as a podcast anywhere you get your podcasts. John Lough, thank you so much for your time today, for joining the Trump Report. We have had another busy week, this time particularly in Washington. So Keir Starmer met with Donald Trump for the first time yesterday after a pretty divisive few weeks. What was your takeaways for the meeting? Did you consider it pretty cordial?
Yeah, it was obviously a very cordial meeting, and I think that if you compare the treatment of Keir Starmer with that of President Macron a few days ago, I think there was quite a sharp contrast, and that was intended. And it does seem that Trump has some liking for the UK. Obviously, it was a masterstroke and a predictable one by Keir Starmer to bring the invitation from King Charles. And that obviously seems to land well always with Trump, but I think just the tone of the press conference, it was clear that despite the fact that they come from very different places on the political spectrum, they seem somehow to have found a common language, and that's extremely important for the UK, but I think more broadly for Europe at the moment. And it does suggest that the UK might be able to play, I don't like the term bridge, but it might be able to play this role as some form of intermediary between the rest of Europe and the US. And at the moment, when obviously this situation in Ukraine remains critical, and when Trump is expecting Europe to do much more of the heavy lifting, this is important.
It was an interesting meeting, again, if we do compare it to Emmanuel Macron's meeting earlier in the week. But one thing that was quite funny that it happened twice, John, was Keir Starmer correcting Donald Trump, saying, no, we were giving money as a gift or whatever, similar to Emmanuel Macron with what he said to correcting Donald Trump in front of the press. It was kind of funny that this happened twice this week.
Yes, but I think that's an indication that Trump's approaches don't confuse me with the facts. I know what I'm talking about. I rely on my instincts here. And, he keeps, landing the same messages about, Europe's reluctance to pay for its own defense, the fact that it, in his view, has been a free rider for decades at the expense of the US taxpayer. And, of course, he has a point here. And I think nobody can deny this. And US presidents over many years were saying this behind closed doors, and he was the first one to really bring it out into the open. And you have to say, in a way, he's already galvanized the Europeans, because people realize that they really are going to have to invest in defense now, because the US is no longer committed to Europe in the same way. Although I think it's important, Trump has said, and no doubt to the relief of many, that the US stands by its NATO commitment. What that means in practice, of course, is another thing. If, hypothetically, a member state of NATO, other than the US, were attacked, would the US really be there? And how would it be there? Would it be prepared to use military force to defend an ally? But we've never really known the full answer to that question in the history of NATO, because fortunately we've never been tested in that way. But Trump's message has landed about the need to invest in defense. But at the same time, people are obviously in Europe very concerned about what sort of deal he might try to do with Russia. And there was absolute dismay earlier this week when in the United Nations Security Council the US chose to, in the United Nations, that the US chose to vote with North Korea, Russia, Venezuela, and others, Belarus, and broke with its Western allies. So that is a very, I think, disturbing precedent. But it's clear that Trump is trying to curry favor at the moment with the Russians and is prepared to go against, it seems, some of his instincts. The art of the deal says you should never be in a hurry to do a deal because you put yourself at a disadvantage. But Trump is doing exactly that with the Russians and suggesting that he wants to get this deal done as soon as possible. So in a way, I think the Russians just can't believe their luck. This is all too good to be true. And there is going to be a catch, believe me, Maddie, there is going to be a catch at some point soon when I think that their objectives do not fully align, and then they get into, I think, the real meat of a negotiation.
I wonder, John, oh God, all we're hearing is deal, deal, deal from the Trump administration. We've got Steve Witkoff, the big dealer, going over to Turkey and to Saudi Arabia. It's all we hear from the administration is all about the art of making a deal. But I want to get back onto that, the point that you were making. Donald Trump's special envoy or his team were representing at the UN Security Council this week. And yes, they made that bold move to vote alongside Russia, alongside Belarus, North Korea, to basically not condemn Russia for the invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 and everything that's come alongside with that. So you said the word disturbing before. I want a yes or no, John. Was that moment in the UN the most disturbing thing that Donald Trump and his team have done so far?
I'm not sure about that. I think the signaling to the Russians that they were prepared even before starting negotiations to make seemingly major concessions. In other words, no NATO membership for Ukraine, no US boots on the ground in the case of a peace deal. I think those, to my mind, were, let's say, more consequential. I think the UN vote, that was just, a typical sort of Trump tactical thing, and he just doesn't care about the consequences. And I think when you start to look at how this negotiation is shaping up with Russia, and let's keep in mind, on the US side, to my mind and to my knowledge, there is nobody there with any experience of negotiating with the Russians. And the Russians are extremely skilled negotiators. Look at the two heavyweights they sent to Riyadh, the long-standing foreign minister Lavrov, the presidential foreign policy advisor, former Russian ambassador to Washington, Yuri Ushakov. These are really serious people. And it made the others, the people on the other side of the table, the US delegation, really look like a bunch of amateurs. So I don't know who else is behind this in the White House, but I think the expertise is paper thin.
Yesterday, Donald Trump, when he met with Keir Starmer and he was doing a press conference, a reporter asked him about him calling Volodymyr Zelenskyy a dictator before the Ukrainian president's arrival, which will happen later today on Friday. He said, "Oh, did I say that? I can't believe I said that." Next question. What was your response to one of the most scandalous things President Trump has said to this day, I would say?
Well, I was just reminded, of the old adage, don't look at what Trump says, look at what he does. And he just uses words so casually. He says things off the cuff. Trying to script his remarks must be just completely impossible. And he was clearly irritated by Zelenskyy's refusal initially to sign this critical minerals deal. And I think Zelenskyy deserves a lot of credit for standing up and saying I can't sign this agreement in the current form. And it seems the US side then amended it possibly quite substantially. But maybe Trump isn't sort of used to that type of behavior, particularly from a leader who's in a tight spot. and against whom he seems to bear some sort of grudge, because back in 2019, I think it was, that Trump wanted help from Zelenskyy to get dirt on Joe Biden's son, Hunter, for his dealings in Ukraine, and Zelenskyy didn't play ball. So it seems that he hasn't forgotten these things. But on the other hand, President Zelenskyy is going to be in Washington today, and maybe they'll kind of kiss and make up. But he also referred to him, I think, as a modestly successful comedian. He made some other sort of disparaging remarks about Zelenskyy's leadership. But you sometimes wonder, is this a combination just of his prejudice, maybe his lack of detailed knowledge, and then also his desire to cozy up to the Russian side ahead of this negotiation because he's so keen to secure a result, and at the end of the day to receive his Nobel Peace Prize, because this does seem to be very important to him.
It is. That's what we're hearing as well, is about the Nobel Peace Prize and who's going to nominate him, and whether that's to get a good way to get into his good books. But John, further negotiations took place yesterday in Turkey, as I mentioned before. Putin apparently said to a news organisation also that these talks were inspiring hope. Now, when you have the Russian president say that these negotiations, these talks, they're inspiring hope for the end of a war, but then you've still got him launching various drone attacks on Ukraine, what do you think that says about the state of the situation?
Well, it tells us, I think this is typical Russian behavior, that in the run-up to the negotiation, you actually increase the pressure on your enemy here. And it shows that you're still very serious about defending your perceived interests. You have the capacity to do that, and you're only going to stop when you have the confidence that some breakthrough can be achieved. So you've got this combination of Trump trying to play Putin and Putin trying to play Trump. So Putin is cautiously talking up the prospect of a successful outcome to this negotiation. But my impression is that the Russians have reason to be concerned when Trump bears these gifts, because, okay, he's made these major seemingly concessions to the Russians on NATO, on US presence in possible presence to police a peace agreement in Ukraine. So what's he going to want in return? What is he? I don't think he's asked for that yet. And might it be something that the Russians actually don't want to deliver? There's a lot of speculation that it might be something related to China, and that the Trump administration would like somehow to pull Russia away from its close relationship with China. That's completely impossible for the Russian side at the moment. Equally, if Trump wanted something in the Arctic, and we know that he's got his eyes on Greenland and Canada as well, for that matter, would the Russians really want to give up some of their positions in the Arctic? Because they are investing there for the long term, because they clearly see that the Arctic is a strategic resource that is probably going to be an arena for certainly competition, but probably confrontation with Western countries. So it's not clear to me that the Russians are confident that they can get a deal. I am absolutely sure that Putin would prefer, if he can, to find a way out of the war in Ukraine, because it's been dragging on for 3 years. He thought it would probably take a couple of weeks. It's costing the country dearly. He clearly has the resources to carry on for a while yet, but not indefinitely. So if he can find a way out of this that meets Russia's interests that, by the way, go well beyond Ukraine. Russia wants to try to re-engineer the European security system. And if the United States is prepared to reduce its presence or to downgrade the importance of NATO, then for him that would be a big win. But I think we're going to see very soon just how aligned the US and Russia are. And my suspicion is we will find out that their interests lie in different areas, and it's going to take a long time to build that alignment, and it may just not be possible. So no deal is also an option here.
And that is kind of what has been spoken about, John. I interviewed John Bolton yesterday, who did mention that he was quite pessimistic about the outcome of this meeting today, but Zelensky will arrive in Washington soon, where he's expected to sign a rare earth minerals contract. There's been a lot of back and forth over what they want and what the US want and what's in the interest of Ukraine. And they seem to have gotten to a place where he's willing to come to Washington and sign this deal. But from your expertise, what should Zelensky be asking for? What should he not walk away from Washington today without?
He should be asking for US commitment to make this peace deal stick. And a peace deal, if it can be achieved, will be no good for Trump if it then comes undone. And we have seen over many years since the start of the Russian intervention in Ukraine in 2014 that there were numerous ceasefires in Donbass, and they all broke down. So how can the US contribute to creating a situation where the peace agreement is durable? That has to, I think, be the top question for him. So he's looking for US commitment to, it seems to be the new fashionable word, to backstop, European countries that might police a peace agreement. But here the Russians are messaging strongly that they are resolutely opposed to any European peacekeeping force on Ukrainian territory. So,
what about American peacekeeping forces?
No, American peacekeeping force is completely out of the question, and Trump has ruled that out. That's not going to happen. It's going to be for the Europeans. But it's the question of what the US then provides to support a peacekeeping operation. And that would be, intelligence assets for sure, and there's talk about American assistance in providing air cover for any force there on the ground. But we're so far away from that at the moment. But I think President Zelensky he's somebody who is persuasive. I think that he has the ability to convince Trump that yes, a peace deal is possible, but it's not a proper peace deal if it then breaks down in a short period of time. So what can the US do to contribute to preserving the deal that might be negotiated?
John, just finally, because we don't have much time, but so just finally, the relationship between Europe and the US and the UK and the US has been kind of quite on the brink in the last few weeks since Donald Trump took over and he started taking over these negotiations and excluding them. But John Bolton, he said to me yesterday that Keir Starmer, when he was about to go to Washington, a piece of advice for him to deal with Donald Trump was to basically flatter him, to stroke his ego, to make him feel like he's the only guy in the world that can get these things through. Who cares what you have to say to someone to get a deal done like that, to get peace in Ukraine? I wonder, Donald Trump, he's been using the same kind of flattery on Putin. He's been calling him smart and cunning this week, saying that they have a great relationship, saying he really respects Vladimir Putin. Do you think Trump is basically taking a leaf out of his own book and acknowledges that perhaps Vladimir Putin is cut from the same cloth as him, that he needs to have his ego stroked in order to start listening to people outside of his immediate team?
Oh yeah, Trump is playing his own game here. I think, Maddie, what's very interesting about this interaction between Putin and Trump is that Trump, by virtue of his background as a real estate developer in New York, he knows how gangsters operate and think. And he isn't the only Western leader with that type of experience, which makes him, for Putin, a potentially quite challenging negotiating partner. And during Trump's first term, it was clear that Trump admired Putin, was, I think, rather overawed by him. This time round, I suspect that the dynamic will be a little bit different, simply because Trump is the man who came back from political death after his first term. All the events that on Capitol Hill and then the legal cases, all these things. Who would have thought that he was in fact going to make it back the way he did? So he's somebody who, of course, admires greatly his own achievements, but I think that sort of reinforced self-esteem going into a meeting with Putin is going to, I think, encourage Trump to behave probably more boldly and perhaps to expect a greater deal of respect from Putin on this occasion. So I think that this negotiation is going to be a little bit different this time. At least the atmosphere of the talks will be a little bit different. But I think one important thing to point out here, Maddie, is that sometimes politicians do the right things for the wrong reasons. And Trump's determination to show to his electorate that he's a very powerful leader on the global stage, he can achieve a peace in a very short space of time in Ukraine. Of course, that's his motivation, the Nobel Peace Prize, goodness knows what else. But in actual fact, I believe there is an opportunity to end this war, and it's important to end it. Because at one level, he's absolutely right. This ridiculous loss of life, the extraordinary amounts of money being invested from both sides in a war that it could carry on for a very, very long time in this way, the sort of positional war. So the US doesn't have an interest in this going on. Europeans want to bring it to an end as best they can. And I think at the end of the day, Russia probably wants to bring it to an end. But the question is, can this be done in a just and durable form? As somebody said recently, Trump just wants peace, but the Ukrainians need and the Europeans need a just peace. And those are two very different things.
Well, we'll be waiting and watching for that interaction between Trump and Zelenskyy today and everything to unfold as the negotiations keep going. But John Lough, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report and bringing your expertise on the show yet again.
Thank you, Maddie. A pleasure as always.